The fluorescent lights in the divorce court buzzed like a swarm of wasps overhead, casting harsh shadows across the mahogany table where my husband sat, radiating confidence. Michael Bradford leaned back in his leather chair, his Rolex catching the light as he folded his arms across his chest, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times before. It always preceded something cruel. His attorney, Douglas Harmon, stood at the podium shuffling papers, with the rehearsed precision of a man who'd never lost a case in 20 years. Behind Michael sat his business partner, Victoria Sterling, her legs crossed at the ankle, her red lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She wore the diamond earrings I'd helped Michael pick out last Christmas. The ones he'd said were for an important client. The lie tasted bitter even in memory. Michael turned his head just slightly, enough for only me to see his expression. His voice dropped to a whisper that sliced through the courtroom's quiet hum like a razor. "You're too dumb to understand business, Caitlin. You always were." Every syllable was designed to wound, to remind me of every time I'd questioned him and been dismissed. Every idea I'd shared that he'd stolen and claimed as his own. Every moment I'd been made to feel small in the empire we'd built together. But this time, I didn't flinch. My hand rested on a leather portfolio beside me, fingers steady, despite the hurricane of rage swirling beneath my ribs. Inside that portfolio was a document that would turn his world to ash. Inside, it was proof that the woman sitting across from him wasn't the naive girl he'd married 15 years ago. I was the graduate of Stanford's Graduate School of Business, the daughter of a forensic accountant, and the woman who'd spent 6 months meticulously documenting every lie he'd ever told. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Caitlin Bradford, soon to be Caitlin Morrison again. And before this hearing ends, Michael will learn that underestimating me was the most expensive mistake of his life. Boston in autumn was beautiful in the way only money could make it. Our brownstone in Beacon Hill overlooked the Common, its brick facade covered in ivy that turned crimson and gold each October. Inside, everything was curated perfection. Marble countertops, imported Italian tile, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Michael called it our castle. I called it the place where I slowly disappeared. I met Michael Bradford at a charity gala in 2011. He was charming, ambitious, a rising star in commercial real estate development who promised to build an empire. I was finishing my MBA at Stanford, top of my class, with offers from 3 Fortune 500 companies waiting on my desk. My father, Robert Morrison, had been a forensic accountant for the FBI before retiring, and he'd taught me to read financial statements the way other children learn to read picture books. That boy's got expensive taste and cheap ethics. My father had warned me the night Michael proposed. "Watch your back, Caitlin." I'd laughed it off. I was in love. I was young. I was a fool. Michael convinced me to decline the job offers. "We're building something together," he'd said, holding my hands across a candlelit table at 9 Park, Bradford Development Group. "You and me, partners in everything." So I became Mrs. Michael Bradford. I poured my knowledge into his fledgling company, restructured his chaotic bookkeeping, secured investor meetings through my Stanford connections, and drafted the business plan that would eventually bring in $12 million in seed funding. My fingerprints were on every success he claimed as his own. Within 3 years, Bradford Development Group was one of Boston's fastest-growing firms. Within 5, Michael had stopped introducing me as his business partner and started calling me my wife. With the same tone, someone might say my accessory. The shift was so gradual I didn't notice the cage forming around me until the door had already locked. It started with small comments. "You don't need to come to this meeting, honey. It's just boring financial stuff." Never mind that I had a degree in finance, and he'd barely passed undergraduate economics. Then came the credit cards. One by one, my access disappeared. "Just consolidating things for tax purposes," Michael explained with that easy smile that used to make my heart race. Now it made my stomach turn. Victoria Sterling entered our lives in 2018, hired as Michael's business development consultant. She was brilliant, I'll give her that. Harvard-educated, sharp as a knife, with connections that opened doors even I couldn't access. Michael started staying late at the office, started taking calls in his car, started smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. When I confronted him, he laughed. Actually laughed. Victoria's a professional colleague, Caitlin. God, you're becoming paranoid. Maybe you should talk to someone about that. His mother, Patricia Bradford, agreed wholeheartedly. She'd never thought I was good enough for her son anyway. Michael works hard, she'd say, sipping tea in our living room like a queen holding court. The least you can do is support him instead of creating drama. Drama. That's what they called it when I asked questions. When I wanted to see the company books. When I suggested we needed better legal compliance. Drama. My 38th birthday fell on a Tuesday in March. Michael forgot entirely. He was in New York with Victoria, closing a deal on a luxury condo development in Tribeca. Or so he said. Patricia came by with a gift. A $50 gift card to Home Goods. For the house, she said sweetly. I know you like to decorate. 20 minutes later, she handed Victoria a Cartier box. I watched from the kitchen doorway as Victoria opened it, her face lighting up with practiced surprise. Inside was a white gold bracelet set with sapphires. The same bracelet I'd shown Michael 6 months earlier, circled in red pen and a catalog I'd left on his desk. For all your hard work keeping my son's company running smoothly, Patricia cooed, fastening it around Victoria's wrist. Michael stood beside them, his hand resting casually on Victoria's lower back. The gesture was intimate, possessive. When he finally looked at me, standing there in my own kitchen, there was no guilt in his eyes, only satisfaction. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had I become so pale, so thin, so erased? The confident Stanford graduate who'd once commanded boardrooms was gone, replaced by a ghost who asked permission to buy groceries. In that moment, something inside me broke. Or maybe it finally healed. I opened my laptop for the first time in months, creating a new email account Michael didn't know about. Then I started searching company filings, property records, tax documents, bank statements. If he wanted to treat me like I was stupid, fine. Let him think that. Stupid people make the best spies. Nobody sees them coming. The first crack in Michael's facade appeared in a forgotten folder. He'd left his laptop open on the dining table, rushing out for an emergency meeting with investors. I'd learned long ago not to ask questions. They only earned me condescending explanations or outright dismissal. But that morning, something made me pause. The screen glowed with an open email from Victoria. Subject line, Phoenix transfer complete, Phoenix. I'd never heard Michael mention any project by that name. My hands trembled as I clicked open the message. It was short, clinical, stripped of emotion. The Phoenix LLC transfer is complete. $2.03 M moved to offshore account as discussed. Next phase ready for your approval. V $2.3 million. Offshore account. The words swam before my eyes. I grabbed my phone and photographed the screen, then the entire email thread. Message after message revealed a pattern. Money flowing out of Bradford Development Group into shell companies with names like Phoenix Holdings, Meridian Properties LLC, and Cascade Ventures. Every single one listed Victoria Sterling as the registered agent. I barely heard the front door open. Forget something, I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. Michael appeared in the doorway, eyes immediately darting to the laptop. Just grabbed the wrong folder, he said casually. But I saw the flash of calculation cross his face. Were you using my computer? Just checking the weather. I lied smoothly, stepping away. Is that a problem? He studied me for a long moment, then smiled. Course not, babe. What's mine is yours, right? The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. That afternoon, while Michael was genuinely gone, I dove deeper. Bradford Development Group's publicly filed tax returns showed revenue of $8.04 million the previous year. But when I cross-referenced that with the project completion records Michael had left in his home office, the one he thought I never entered, the numbers told a different story. Completed projects totaled $15.07 million in revenue. $7.3 million had simply vanished from the official books. I sat back in his leather chair, my father's voice echoing in my memory. Follow the money, Caitlin. Numbers don't lie. People do. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own home. I smiled when Michael wanted me to smile. I nodded when Patricia lectured me about being a supportive wife. I pretended not to notice when Victoria's perfume lingered in Michael's car. And every moment he wasn't looking, I documented everything. Photographs of bank statements carelessly left in his briefcase. Screenshots of emails he didn't know I could access through the iCloud account we'd once shared. Recordings of phone calls I wasn't supposed to hear, made from the library outside his office, where voices carried through the ventilation system like whispered confessions. The picture that emerged was breathtaking in its audacity. Michael had been systematically stealing from his own company for 3 years. Money would come in from legitimate projects, then get funneled through Victoria's shell companies before disappearing into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The investors who'd trusted him, the contractors who'd built his buildings, even the tax authorities, everyone was being robbed. And Victoria wasn't just his business partner. She was his accomplice, his mistress, his co-conspirator in a fraud scheme that could send them both to federal prison. Make sure you're subscribed to Stories Untold, because this is just the beginning. Hit that like button if you want to see what I do with all this evidence. I almost confronted him. Almost. It was a Friday night, and Michael came home late, his tie loosened, smelling like scotch and Victoria's signature perfume, something expensive with notes of jasmine. He found me in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a dinner I was no longer hungry for. "We need to talk about something," he said, and my heart stopped. Did he know? Had I been careless? Left some trace of my investigation? But then he continued, and I realized his cruelty had found a new depth. "I want a divorce, Caitlin." The knife in my hand stilled. I turned slowly to face him. He leaned against the counter, casual as if he were discussing the weather. "We've grown apart, you have to feel it too. I've already spoken to Douglas Harmon. He's the best divorce attorney in Boston. He'll make sure this is fair for both of us." Fair. Coming from a man who'd stolen millions, who'd gaslit me for years, who'd made me feel worthless while building an empire on my ideas. "When?" I managed to ask. "Soon. I'm filing papers next week." He actually smiled. "Don't worry, I'll make sure you're taken care of. You'll get the house, a decent settlement. You won't have to work. Won't have to work. As if I hadn't worked every day of our marriage, unpaid and unappreciated." "Is there someone else?" I asked, though I already knew. His pause told me everything. "That's not relevant to the divorce. Victoria." Of course it was Victoria. The woman who wore my jewelry, drove in my husband's car, and probably slept in hotel rooms paid for with stolen money. Michael pushed off the counter. "I'm staying at the office tonight. We'll talk details tomorrow." He left without kissing me goodbye. Left me standing in the kitchen of the house I'd turned into a home, holding a knife and a lifetime of shattered promises. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't break. Instead, I walked to my laptop, opened the encrypted folder where I'd stored every piece of evidence, and sent a single email to the one person I knew could help. 2. Email protected subject. "Need your expertise, Dad. Remember when you said to watch my back? I should have listened. I need you to look at something. It's urgent." See, the response came within minutes. "Send everything. I'll call you in an hour. And Caitlin, whatever you're thinking of doing, do it smart, not emotional. Smart wins, always." Dad, my father, had retired from the FBI 3 years earlier, but his mind was sharper than ever. When his call came through, I was ready. Sitting in the guest bedroom with the door locked and my evidence spread across the bed like a paper trail to hell. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the missing $7.03 million, Victoria's involvement, the timing of Michael's divorce filing, right before the company's annual audit. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Dad, I'm here. I'm just a..." He exhaled slowly. "Caitlin, this isn't just a divorce. This is wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. Federal crimes. I know. If you go to the authorities, Michael goes to prison. Victoria too. Maybe Patricia, if she knew about it." "I know," I repeated. Another pause. "And if you don't?" "Then he divorces me." takes everything and gets away with it. I become the discarded wife who was too dumb to understand business. I heard my father's chair creak, the same sound from my childhood when he'd stayed up late, working on cases at the kitchen table. Send me everything you have. Every document, every photo, every recording. I have a contact at the FBI Boston field office, Special Agent Marcus Webb. He specializes in white-collar crime. Will they listen? Sweetheart, with what you've collected, they'll be fighting over who gets to make the arrest. My hand shook as I began transferring files. Dad, I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you careful. But Caitlin, his voice softened. I'm proud of you. You're doing what most people are too afraid to do. You're fighting back. We stayed on the phone for 2 more hours while he reviewed everything remotely. By the time we hung up, he'd already scheduled a meeting with Agent Webb for Monday morning. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of the guest room I decorated 3 years ago for visitors who never came. Down the hall was the master bedroom I'd once shared with Michael, now empty except for my clothes and the ghost of who I used to be. The house was silent except for the old pipes creaking and the distant sound of traffic on Beacon Street. Somewhere across the city, Michael was probably with Victoria, celebrating his imminent freedom, planning his future, counting money that wasn't his. He had no idea the cage he thought he built around me was about to become his own. The FBI Boston field office was located in Chelsea, a nondescript building that could have been anything from an insurance office to a tech startup. Agent Marcus Webb met me in a conference room on the 3rd floor, my father at my side. Webb was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with graying temples and eyes that missed nothing. He shook my hand firmly, gestured to a chair, and opened his laptop without preamble. Mrs. Bradford, I've reviewed the preliminary materials your father sent over. What you've uncovered is significant. He pulled up a document on his screen. Before we proceed, I need to ask, how did you obtain these records? My father had prepped me for this question, for my husband's home office and shared cloud accounts. Nothing was password protected beyond accounts I had legitimate access to as his wife. I took photos of documents that were left openly visible. Webb nodded. And you're prepared to cooperate fully with the federal investigation? Yes. Even knowing that cooperation means wearing a wire, potentially for weeks or months. That you'll need to act normally around your husband while gathering additional evidence. That if he suspects anything, you could be in danger. The word danger hung in the air like smoke. I thought about Michael's hand on Victoria's back, Patricia's condescending smile, the years of being dismissed, belittled, erased. I'm prepared, I said. Webb exchanged a look with my father, then slid a document across the table. This is a cooperation agreement. It grants you immunity from any potential charges related to Bradford Development Group's activities, and it places you under federal protection. In exchange, you agree to assist in the investigation and testify if necessary. I signed without hesitation. Webb pulled out a small black device that looked like an ordinary pen. This is a recording device. Clicks on and off here. Stores up to 48 hours of audio and transmits to a secure server we'll monitor. You'll carry this everywhere. He handed me a second item, a watch. GPS tracker. If you signal distress, or if we lose your location, agents will respond immediately. My father reached over and squeezed my hand. You don't have to do this, Caitlin, but I did. Not for revenge, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. I did it because somewhere in America, another woman was being told she was too dumb to understand, too weak to matter, too insignificant to fight back. I was doing this for her, and for the girl I used to be, before Michael Bradford taught me to disappear. When do we start? I asked. Webb smiled grimly. You already have. Welcome to Operation Phoenix. Don't forget to drop a like if you're hooked, and comment below where you're watching from. Next part is going to blow your mind. Subscribe to Stories Untold so you don't miss it. Returning home that night felt like stepping into enemy territory. The brownstone that had once represented everything I'd worked for now loomed like a prison, its warm lights nothing more than a facade hiding the rot within. I pulled into the driveway at 9:47 p.m. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked up the stone steps, keys jingling in my hand like a betrayal waiting to happen. He was on the phone when I entered, his voice carrying down the stairs with that easy confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. I set my purse on the console table, fingers brushing the pen's cool surface one last time before I climbed toward his voice. "The timing's perfect," Michael was saying. "Once the divorce is final, we'll liquidate the Brookline properties and move everything through Phoenix. Caitlin won't see a dime of it." I stopped outside his office door, hand trembling as I pressed the pen's activation button through the leather of my purse. A tiny vibration confirmed it was recording. "What about the audit?" Victoria's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "Your accountant's been asking questions about the discrepancies." Michael laughed. Actually laughed. "Fire him. Tell him we're going in a different direction. By the time anyone figures it out, the money will be untouchable, and I'll be free of the dead weight I've been carrying for 15 years. Dead weight? He meant me. I pushed open the door. "Hey, honey, working late?" Michael's head snapped up, his expression shifting in a microsecond from predatory to pleasant. "Caitlin, yeah, just wrapping up some details with Victoria. You remember Victoria, right?" "Of course." I smiled, walking to his desk and perching on the edge like I used to in the early years. "Hi, Victoria." "Hello, Caitlin." Her voice was syrup-sweet through the speaker. "Michael was just telling me about your situation. I'm so sorry things didn't work out." The fake sympathy made my skin crawl, but I kept my expression neutral. "These things happen. At least we're handling it maturely, right, Michael?" He relaxed slightly, reaching over to pat my hand like I was a child. "Exactly. No need for drama. Douglas is drawing up papers that'll be fair to everyone." Fair, that word again. "I'm sure he is." I stood, stretching casually. "I'll let you finish. Just wanted to say goodnight." "Night, babe." I walked out slowly, deliberately, counting my steps until I reached the guest bedroom. Only then did I allow myself to breathe, to let my hands shake, to acknowledge the nausea rolling through me. The pen in my purse had captured everything. His contempt, his conspiracy with Victoria, his plans to hide assets before the divorce. I sent the recording to Agent Webb's secure server, then collapsed on the bed, staring at the ceiling while my pulse slowly returned to normal. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. "Proud of you, sweetheart. Stay smart. Stay safe." I closed my eyes, whispering to the empty room, "I'm trying, Dad." The next 6 weeks were the longest of my life. Every morning I woke up and put on the mask of the compliant, heartbroken wife. I made coffee Michael didn't drink. I attended Patricia's charity luncheons and smiled while she talked about how amicable our divorce would be. I even had dinner with Michael and his attorney Douglas Harmon, discussing settlement terms like I was negotiating my own erasure. All the while the pen recorded everything. Michael grew bolder as the days passed, convinced I'd been successfully neutered. He stopped hiding his phone, stopped lowering his voice during calls with Victoria. One Tuesday afternoon, I found him in the living room with architectural plans spread across the coffee table. Plans for a development project in Cambridge I'd never heard of. "What's this?" I asked, carrying in tea I'd made as a peace offering. "New project. Victoria secured the land last month." He didn't even look up. "It's going to be massive. 30 luxury condos, retail space on the ground floor. We're calling it Sterling Heights." Sterling, Victoria's last name. "Sounds expensive," I ventured carefully. "12 million initial investment. Worth triple that when we're done." He finally glanced up, that familiar condescension in his eyes. "Don't worry about it, Caitlin. It's complex business stuff. Not really your thing." The recording pen sat in my cardigan pocket, capturing every dismissive word. That night I searched property records for the Cambridge land. Sterling Heights LLC had purchased it for $4.02 million, money that came directly from Bradford Development Group's operating account. But the property was titled solely in Victoria's name. Michael was using company funds to build an asset he and Victoria would own personally, completely separate from the business. It was brilliant and completely illegal. I photographed everything and sent it to Agent Webb with a simple message, "Found another one." His response came within minutes. "Excellent work. We're building an airtight case. Keep going. If you're watching from outside the US, drop a comment and let me know. And make sure you subscribe to Stories Untold. The story's about to get intense. March 17th changed everything. I was in Michael's office, a place I'd learned to navigate like a thief in my own home, photographing bank statements he'd left on his desk. The recording pen sat beside me, capturing the rustle of paper, the click of my phone's camera. I was so focused I didn't hear the front door open. Didn't hear footsteps on the stairs? What the hell are you doing? I spun around, phone clutched in my guilty hand. Michael stood in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. Behind him, Victoria peered over his shoulder, her expression sharp and calculating. Time crystallized. I could see every option, every lie, every possible outcome spreading before me like a branching path. Choose wrong and the investigation ends. Choose wrong and I might not make it out of this room. Looking for the insurance documents, I said, my voice remarkably steady. My attorney asked for them. For the settlement negotiations. Michael's eyes narrowed. Insurance documents are in the filing cabinet, not on my desk. I know, but I thought you might have updated them recently. You're always saying I don't pay attention to important paperwork. I held up my phone. I was going to take a photo to send to my lawyer. Save you the trouble of making copies. The lie hung between us, fragile as glass. Victoria pushed past Michael, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She picked up the recording pen from the desk, turning it over in her manicured fingers. Expensive pen. Is this new? My heart stopped. It's mine, a gift from my father. He knows I like nice things. She clicked it, once, twice. The recording function toggled off, then on again. I prayed she couldn't hear the faint vibration, couldn't see the tiny LED indicator hidden in the clip. Your father has good taste, she said finally, setting it down. Michael stepped closer, invading my space the way he used to when he wanted to intimidate me. Caitlin, you need to understand something. This office is off limits during the divorce. My attorney was very clear. No access to business documents without his supervision. Are we clear? I nodded, gathering my phone and pen with hands that didn't shake. Crystal clear. I'm sorry, I'll call Douglas if I need anything else. I walked past them both down the stairs out the front door. I didn't stop until I reached my car, didn't breathe normally until I'd driven 3 blocks away. Then I pulled over, gripping the steering wheel, while my entire body shook with adrenaline and terror. My phone rang. Agent Webb. We heard everything, he said without preamble. Are you safe? Yes, I'm in my car. They bought it. Barely. Caitlin, you can't go back there. It's too dangerous. We'll set you up in a safe house until… No. The word came out harder than I intended. If I disappear now, Michael will know something's wrong. He'll move the money, destroy evidence, run. I'm so close, Agent Webb. Please, let me finish this. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20. 72 more hours, he finally said. We're accelerating the timeline. The arrest is scheduled for the divorce hearing. We'll coordinate with the judge. But Caitlin, if anything feels wrong, if you sense any danger at all, you signal us immediately. Understood? Understood. I drove to a coffee shop and sat in a corner booth, hands wrapped around a latte I couldn't. The watch on my wrist showed my location as a blinking blue dot on Agent Webb's screen. Somewhere in Boston, federal agents were monitoring my every move, ready to respond if things went sideways. I'd never felt more alone or more determined. The following Saturday, Patricia Bradford summoned me to brunch at her Chestnut Hill estate. It wasn't a request, it never was with her. I arrived at noon sharp, the recording pen disguised as an elegant Mont Blanc in my purse, the GPS watch hidden beneath the sleeve of my blouse. She greeted me in her sunroom, surrounded by orchids, and the kind of wealth that came from old Boston money. Tea was already poured, finger sandwiches arranged on china that cost more than my first car. Caitlin, dear. She gestured to the chair across from her like a queen granting an audience. We need to discuss your future. I sat, activating the recording pen with a subtle movement. My future, post-divorce. I want to ensure you understand the family's position. Patricia sipped her tea, her diamonds catching the light. Michael has been generous in his settlement offer. The house, a monthly allowance, your car. Most women in your position would be grateful. I am grateful, I lied. Good. Because it would be unfortunate if you tried to make things difficult. if you challenged the prenuptial agreement or made accusations about Michael's business practices. Her smile was ice-wrapped in politeness. The Bradford family has resources, dear. Legal resources, social resources. We protect our... The threat was clear, wrapped in silk but sharp as a blade. I understand, I said softly. I'm glad. She set down her teacup with a delicate clink. You know, I never thought you were quite right for Michael. Too educated, too opinionated. Michael needs someone who complements his strengths, not someone who competes with him. Someone like Victoria, she meant. Patricia, can I ask you something? I leaned forward, playing the role of the confused, desperate wife. Did you know about Victoria? About their relationship? Her expression didn't change. I know that Victoria Sterling is an exceptional businesswoman who has helped my son build an empire. Whatever personal relationship they may have is none of my concern, as long as it doesn't threaten the family's interest. And the money moving through the shell companies? The offshore accounts, is that also part of protecting the family's interests? The words were out before I could stop them. I'd crossed a line, revealed too much knowledge. Patricia's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I could have backtracked, could have played dumb. Instead, I went all in. I'm talking about the $7 million that disappeared from Bradford Development Group's books. The property titled in Victoria's name but paid for with company funds. The Phoenix LLC accounts in the Cayman Islands. I'm talking about the fact that your son isn't just cheating on me, he's committing federal fraud. The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia stood slowly, her composure cracking just enough for me to see the fury beneath. You stupid, stupid girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've documented everything, I continued. My voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Bank records, emails, recordings. I know about all of it, Patricia. And soon everyone else will too. She moved faster than I expected, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. You're going to destroy those documents. All of them. Or I will make sure you lose everything. Your reputation, your father's pension, any hope of a future. The Bradford family does not lose to someone like you. I pulled my wrist free, standing to face her. We were the same height, but in that moment I felt 10 feet tall. The Bradford family already lost. You just don't know it yet. I walked out, leaving my tea untouched and Patricia standing among her orchids, her perfect world beginning to crumble. Hit that subscribe button right now. You won't believe what happens in next part. And drop a like if you're Team Caitlin all the way. With only 48 hours until the divorce hearing, Agent Webb called an emergency meeting. I met him and my father at a Panera in Brookline, far enough from Beacon Hill to avoid anyone I knew. Patricia Bradford knows, I said immediately sliding into the booth. I confronted her this morning, told her I had evidence. My father paled. Caitlin, what were you thinking? I was thinking she needed to know that she can't bully me anymore. I pulled out my phone, playing the recording of our conversation. Patricia's threats, her admission that she knew about Victoria, her attempt to intimidate me into silence. Agent Webb listened, his expression unreadable. When it finished, he sat back and exhaled slowly. This is either the best thing that could have happened or the worst, he said. If Patricia tips off Michael, they'll start destroying evidence tonight. If she doesn't, she won't, I said with certainty. Patricia's too proud. She thinks the family name and their money can protect them from anything. She'll try to handle this quietly. Maybe threaten my father. Maybe hire investigators to discredit me. But she won't believe I actually went to federal authorities. Women like Patricia don't think women like me have that kind of courage. My father reached across the table, squeezing my hand. She's underestimated you her entire life. They all have. Agent Webb pulled out his laptop, typing rapidly. Okay, here's the plan. The divorce hearing is Monday at 10 a.m. Judge Catherine Morrison is already coordinated with our office. She's handled federal cases before and knows what to expect. You'll submit your settlement agreement. Michael's attorney will present his, and that's when we move in. What do I do until then? I asked. Act normal. Don't confront anyone else. Don't give them any reason to suspect. Can you do that? I thought about the last 15 years. All the times I'd swallowed my anger, buried my hurt, pretended everything was fine while dying inside. I've been acting normal my whole marriage. I can do it for 2 more days. That night, Michael came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner I didn't want. When he appeared in the doorway, his expression softer than I'd seen in months. "Hey," he said, "can we talk?" I turned off the stove, wiping my hands on a towel. "Of course." He sat at the kitchen island, running his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. "I know this has been hard on you. The divorce, all the changes. I wanted you to know. I don't hate you, Caitlin. We just grew apart." It happens. The recording pen sat in my pocket, capturing every word of his performance. "I know," I said gently. "I don't hate you either, Michael. That at least was true." Hate required caring. And I'd stopped caring about Michael Bradford the moment he called me too dumb to understand business. "Douglas says we're close to a final agreement. You'll be taken care of. You'll have the house. Enough money to live comfortably. You can go back to school, start over. Maybe that's what you need. A fresh start." He was being kind, almost tender. It would have broken me once. Now it just felt like another manipulation. A final attempt to keep me compliant until the papers were signed and he was free. "Maybe you're right," I said, playing along. "A fresh start sounds nice." Michael smiled, standing and pulling me into an embrace that felt like hugging a stranger. That night, I lay in the guest bedroom, listening to Michael move around upstairs. The house settled around me, creaking and sighing like it, too, knew this chapter was ending. I thought about the woman I'd been when I first walked through these doors, young, brilliant, full of hope and ambition. I thought about how systematically that woman had been dismantled, piece by piece, until I'd almost forgotten she existed. But she was still here. Battered, yes. Betrayed, absolutely, but not broken. Never broken. I pulled out my laptop and opened the encrypted folder containing everything I'd gathered. Hundreds of documents, dozens of recordings, a trail of evidence so comprehensive that even the best attorneys in Boston couldn't make it disappear. Agent Webb had confirmed that the FBI had enough for indictments on multiple charges: wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, and conspiracy. Michael Bradford was going to prison. So was Victoria Sterling. And if the evidence implicated Patricia, and I suspected it did, she'd face charges too. The empire they'd built on lies and stolen money was about to collapse. And I was the earthquake that would bring it down. Don't miss next part. It's going to be explosive. Make sure you subscribe to Stories Untold and hit that notification bell. Comment below where you're watching from. Sunday morning arrived with gray skies and the kind of cold rain that makes Boston feel like it's clinging to winter. I woke early, going through my closet for the perfect outfit for tomorrow's hearing. I settled on a navy suit. Professional, serious, the kind of thing a Stanford MBA would wear to a board meeting. My phone buzzed. A text from Agent Webb. "Team in position. Everything's ready. How are you holding up?" I typed back, ready to end this. "At noon," Victoria called. Her voice on the phone was casual, friendly even. "Caitlin, I know tomorrow's going to be difficult. I wanted to reach out woman to woman. I hope we can be cordial. Michael and I, we didn't mean for this to happen. Sometimes life just takes unexpected turns." The audacity was breathtaking. She was calling to gloat, to rub salt in wounds she'd helped create. "I appreciate you calling," I said, my voice warm. "And you're right. Life does take unexpected turns. Tomorrow might surprise all of us. I'm sure it will be straightforward. Douglas has everything handled. I'm sure he does." After we hung up, I stared at the phone, marveling at how convinced they all were of their own invincibility. Michael, Victoria, Patricia, Douglas Harmon. They'd spent so long winning, so long crushing anyone who challenged them, that they'd forgotten a fundamental truth. The underestimated are the most dangerous opponents. That evening, my father came over. We sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee and not saying much. There wasn't much left to say. Everything that could be done had been done. Tomorrow would either vindicate everything I'd sacrificed or prove that money and power really could triumph over truth. "Your mother would be so proud of you," Dad said finally. "She always said you were stronger than you knew." Mom had died of cancer when I was 23, before Michael, before all of this. I'd thought about her often during the worst days of my marriage, wondered what advice she would have given. "I wish she were here," I whispered. "She is, sweetheart." Every bit of strength you've shown? Every brave decision? That's her living on in you. We sat in comfortable silence until the sky darkened completely. When Dad left, he hugged me tighter than usual. See you in court tomorrow, kiddo. Try to get some sleep. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, watching shadows play across the ceiling, running through tomorrow's scenario over and over. Agent Webb had walked me through it 3 times. The hearing would begin normally. Settlement terms would be discussed. And then, at a signal from Judge Morrison, FBI agents would enter the courtroom with arrest warrants. Michael would be in handcuffs before he understood what was happening. The thought should have brought satisfaction, maybe even joy. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of pretending, tired of carrying the weight of other people's lies. But tired wasn't the same as defeated. And tomorrow, the world would learn the difference. I woke at 6 a.m., showered until the water ran cold, and dressed with the kind of care usually reserved for battle, because that's what this was. A war fought with evidence instead of weapons, with truth instead of lies. The courthouse was downtown, a granite building that had seen decades of Boston's legal dramas. I arrived 30 minutes early, finding Agent Webb waiting in an unmarked car across the street. "You ready?" he asked through the window. I nodded. "Let's finish this." Inside, the courtroom was already filling. Douglas Harmon sat at the plaintiff's table, organizing files with meticulous precision. Michael wasn't there yet, probably making a grand entrance to remind everyone who controlled the room. Victoria sat in the gallery, looking elegant in cream Chanel. Patricia sat beside her, dripping diamonds and disdain. My attorney, James Howell, a quiet, methodical man Agent Webb had recommended, was already at our table. He stood when I approached, shaking my hand professionally. "Everything's in place," he murmured. "Just follow the script." I sat down, folding my hands on the table, the same hands that had photographed evidence. He commanded attention effortlessly, his suit custom-tailored, his smile confident. He nodded to Douglas, squeezed Victoria's hand as he passed, and took his seat without once looking in my direction. Judge Catherine Morrison entered at precisely 10 a.m. She was in her early 60s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen every trick, every lie, every manipulation family court could offer. "Be seated," she said crisply. "We're here for Bradford v. Bradford dissolution of marriage. Mr. Harmon, you may present the petitioner's settlement proposal." Douglas stood, smooth as silk. "Thank you, Your Honor. My client, Mr. Michael Bradford, has prepared what we believe is a generous and equitable settlement. Mrs. Bradford will retain the marital residence valued at $2.3 million, receive a monthly allowance of $8,000, and keep her vehicle. In exchange, she waives all claims to Bradford Development Group and any associated business assets." He made it sound reasonable, fair, even, except that the business he wanted me to waive claims to was built on my ideas, funded partially by my family's investments, and currently worth over $30 million. And that was before accounting for the millions Michael had hidden. Judge Morrison looked at me. "Mrs. Bradford, have you had an opportunity to review this proposal?" "I have, Your Honor." I reached into my portfolio and pulled out a manila envelope, standing to hand it directly to Judge Morrison. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit a supplemental filing. It contains financial documents relevant to the dissolution proceedings." Michael's head snapped toward me. Douglas Harmon frowned. Victoria leaned forward. Judge Morrison opened the envelope, pulling out the first page. Her eyebrows rose. She read another page, then another. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Mr. Harmon," she said slowly, "I'm going to ask you and your client to approach the bench." Douglas Harmon approached the bench, with the casual confidence of a man who'd never lost a case. Michael following behind him with barely concealed irritation at the interruption. I watched them from my seat, my hands folded calmly on the table, while my heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Judge Morrison held up one of the documents I'd submitted, a bank statement showing the $2.03 million transfer to Phoenix LLC. Her voice was quiet, meant only for the attorneys and Michael, but in the silent courtroom, every word carried. "Mr. Harmon, are you aware that your client has been moving assets into offshore accounts during these divorce proceedings?" Douglas's face went pale. "Your Honor, I have no knowledge of." And are you aware, Judge Morrison continued, her tone sharpening, that these transfers appear to constitute fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion? Michael's voice cut in loud enough for everyone to hear. Your Honor, my wife is clearly making false accusations to improve her settlement position. This is a common tactic in contentious divorces. Mr. Bradford, Judge Morrison's voice could have frozen fire. I suggest you stop talking immediately. She gestured to the bailiff, who moved toward the courtroom doors. They swung open, and 6 people in dark suits entered, their FBI credentials visible on their belts. Agent Marcus Webb led them, his face professionally neutral as he walked down the center aisle. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Patricia half stood from her seat, her hand clutching her pearls. Victoria's face had gone ashen. Douglas Harmon looked like a man watching his career implode in real time. And Michael finally looked at me. The confusion in his eyes shifted to understanding, then to raw, burning rage. You, he breathed, you did this. Agent Webb reached the plaintiff's table, pulling out a document. Michael Bradford, I'm Special Agent Marcus Webb with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and tax evasion. He nodded to the agent beside him. Read him his rights. This is insane. Michael's voice rose as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. I'm a respected businessman. You can't just, we can and we are, Webb said calmly. He turned to Victoria, who'd shrunk back in her seat like she could disappear into the gallery. Victoria Sterling, you're also under arrest as an accomplice to wire fraud and money laundering. I want my attorney, Victoria managed, her voice barely a whisper as agents moved toward her. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair, and I saw it, the smile I'd been waiting for. It started small, a twitch at the corner of her mouth, then grew into a full, genuine laugh that echoed through the stunned courtroom. Oh, Mr. Bradford, she said, her eyes gleaming with something between justice and satisfaction. Your wife just played you like a violin, and honestly, it's the most beautiful thing I've seen in 20 years on the bench. Michael lunged toward me, held back by 2 agents. You stupid bitch. Do you have any idea what you've done? I'll destroy you. You'll be quiet, Judge Morrison commanded, her gavel striking once with authority, or I'll add contempt of court to your growing list of problems. She turned to Agent Webb. Is there anyone else? Is there anyone? Webb's eyes moved to Patricia, who'd gone completely still in her seat. Patricia Bradford, we have questions regarding your involvement with the White Hope Foundation's finances and your signatures on several fraudulent transfers. You'll need to come with us. I've done nothing wrong, Patricia said, but her voice trembled. My attorneys will meet you at the federal building, Webb finished. Ma'am, please stand. As agents escorted Patricia from her seat, she locked eyes with me. The hatred there was palpable. You've destroyed this family, she hissed. Everything we built, everything you stole, I corrected quietly. There's a difference. If you're loving this story, smash that like button right now. And don't forget to subscribe to Stories Untold. We've got more stories like this coming your way. The courtroom had descended into chaos. Reporters who'd been waiting in the hallway for a routine divorce filing were now flooding in, cameras flashing as agents led Michael, Victoria, and Patricia toward the doors. Douglas Harmon stood frozen at the plaintiff's table, his carefully organized files suddenly meaningless. Judge Morrison struck her gavel 3 times. Clear this courtroom. Everyone except Mrs. Bradford, her counsel, and Agent Webb, out. It took 10 minutes for the bailiffs to restore order, to push the press and curious onlookers back into the hallway. When the doors finally closed, the silence felt profound. Judge Morrison removed her glasses, cleaning them with a handkerchief as she studied me. Mrs. Bradford, or should I say Ms. Morrison, I understand we share a surname. Morrison was my maiden name, Your Honor. I confirmed. Well, Miss Morrison, I've presided over thousands of divorce cases, seen every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to hide assets. But I have never, she paused, that smile returning. I have never seen someone document fraud this comprehensively while maintaining perfect composure. The FBI tells me you've been cooperating for over 2 months. Yes, Your Honor. Wearing a wire, gathering evidence. All while your husband planned to leave you with nothing. She shook her head in what looked like admiration. That takes either tremendous courage or tremendous rage. Which was it? I considered the question. Both, Your Honor, and something else. What's that? Self-respect. I couldn't let him keep telling me I was too dumb to understand business. Not when I understood it better than he ever did. Judge Morrison laughed again, a sound of genuine delight. Well, Ms. Morrison, let's talk about your actual settlement. Given that your husband will likely be spending the next decade in federal prison, and given that you've been a cooperating witness in a major fraud case, I think we can do better than an $8,000 monthly allowance. Agent Webb stepped forward. Your Honor, the FBI will be seizing most of Bradford Development Group's assets as proceeds of criminal activity. However, Ms. Morrison's financial records show she contributed $150,000 of her own family money to the company's initial funding, plus provided intellectual property and business consultation that directly resulted in the company's early success. I have documentation of all of that. My attorney, James Howell, added, pulling out another folder. Emails, business plans, investor presentations. All created by Ms. Morrison during the first 3 years of the company's operation. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Mr. Webb, what happens to the legitimate assets? The ones that weren't derived from fraud? Those will be liquidated. After creditors and defrauded investors are compensated, any remaining funds would typically go to the defendant's estate. But given Ms. Morrison's cooperation and her documented contributions, he glanced at me. The U.S. Attorney is prepared to recommend that she receive a substantial portion as both restitution and compensation. How substantial? The judge asked. We're looking at approximately $4 to $5 million, Your Honor. Plus the family home, which was purchased before the fraudulent activities began. The number hit me like a physical force. $4 to $5 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having. Money that would let me start over. Truly start over without fear or limitation. That seems fair, Judge Morrison said. She turned to me. Ms. Morrison, the court recognizes your cooperation with federal authorities and your significant contributions to what was once a legitimate business. I'm granting you full ownership of the marital residence, plus rights to any non-criminal assets that remain after federal seizure and creditor compensation. Your marriage to Michael Bradford is hereby dissolved. She struck the gavel once, final and absolute. Court is adjourned. I walked out of the courthouse into gray March rain that felt like absolution. News vans lined the street, reporters shouting questions I didn't answer. Agent Webb guided me to an unmarked car, shielding me from cameras with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times. You did good in there, he said as we drove away from the chaos. Most cooperating witnesses break down on the stand or panic when arrests start happening. You didn't even flinch. I've had a lot of practice, pretending everything's fine when it's not, I said, watching the courthouse disappear in the side mirror. This time, I was just pretending for the right reasons. He dropped me at my father's house in Cambridge, where Dad was waiting on the porch with coffee and the kind of hug that only a parent can give. Fierce, protective, proud. I watched the news, he said into my hair. You brought down a whole criminal network, sweetheart. The FBI calling it one of the biggest real estate fraud cases in Massachusetts history. I just took pictures and pressed record, I said, but the enormity of it was starting to sink in. Michael was gone. Victoria was gone. Patricia's empire was crumbling, and I was free. We sat in his living room, the same room where I'd done homework as a teenager, where I'd told him I was getting married, where I'd slowly stopped visiting because Michael always found reasons we were too busy. Dad poured coffee and didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Your mother and I always worried we made you too independent, too strong-willed, thought it might make life harder for you. He smiled, eyes bright with unshed tears. But watching you these past months, that strength saved you, Caitlin. It saved you and brought down people who thought they were untouchable. I learned it from you, I said. You taught me that numbers don't lie, that evidence matters, that truth is worth fighting for. I taught you the mechanics, he corrected. The courage, that was all. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed to Stories Untold yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. The Bradford scandal dominated Boston headlines for weeks. Every day brought new revelations, additional shell companies discovered in Panama and the Cayman Islands, more victims coming forward, investors who'd lost everything to Michael's schemes. The FBI estimated the total fraud at over $18 million. Michael's trial was set for September. His attorney had attempted to negotiate a plea deal, but the U.S. Attorney's Office had refused. They wanted to make an example of him, to send a message that white-collar criminals faced real consequences. Agent Webb told me Michael was looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison. Victoria had turned state's witness almost immediately, providing testimony against Michael in exchange for a reduced sentence. She'd get 10 years instead of 25. I felt nothing when I heard that. No satisfaction, no anger, just a distant acknowledgement that she'd made her choices and now faced the consequences. Patricia was fighting the charges with every resource at her disposal, hiring a team of attorneys who promised to prove her innocence. But the evidence against her was overwhelming. Her signature appeared on too many fraudulent documents, her name on too many shell company filings. The White Hope Foundation had been permanently shuttered, its assets seized, its reputation destroyed. The brownstone in Beacon Hill was mine now, legally and fully. I walked through it on a Tuesday afternoon, looking at rooms that had once felt like a prison, and now felt like nothing. Just rooms, just furniture, just things. I listed it for sale the next day. The money from the settlement came through in April, $4. $7 million after taxes and fees, deposited into an account bearing only my name. I stared at the number on my laptop screen for a long time, trying to comprehend what it meant. Freedom, certainly. Security, absolutely. But more than that, it meant vindication. Proof that I wasn't the stupid, worthless woman Michael had tried to convince me I was. I used some of it to pay off my father's mortgage. He protested, but I insisted. You gave me the tools to survive this, I told him. Let me give you something back. The rest I invested carefully, working with a financial advisor who actually listened to my ideas instead of dismissing them. I was, after all, a Stanford MBA with a talent for reading financial statements. It was time to start acting like it again. On a bright morning in May, I sat in a coffee shop in Harvard Square. My laptop open to a blank document. For weeks, people had been asking me to tell my story. Journalists, podcasters, even a literary agent who thought my experience could become a book. I'd refused them all. But sitting there, watching students hurry past with their backpacks and their futures ahead of them, I realized I did want to tell the story, not for fame or money, but because somewhere out there was another woman sitting in a beautiful house, married to a successful man, slowly disappearing into someone else's shadow. She needed to know she wasn't alone. That documentation was power. That leaving was possible. That fighting back could win. I titled the document, "The Accountant's Daughter: How I Brought Down My Husband's Criminal Empire." The words flowed easier than I expected. Muscle memory from my teaching days returning as I wrote about recognizing financial abuse, gathering evidence, working with federal authorities. I wrote about the fear and the courage, the close calls, and the final triumph. 3 months later, I submitted it to the literary agent. She called me within a week. "This is extraordinary, Caitlin. Raw, powerful, useful. We're going to sell this, and it's going to help a lot of people." The book deal came through in August. Oh, another substantial advance that I immediately allocated to a new project. I've been thinking about it since the divorce finalized. A nonprofit organization that helped women document financial abuse and navigate divorce from high net worth, controlling spouses. We'd provide forensic accounting services, legal referrals, and emotional support. I called it the Morrison Foundation, after my mother, who'd taught me that strength came in many forms. Michael's trial began in September, and I was called to testify on the third day. Walking into that federal courtroom felt different than the divorce hearing. Heavier, more final. This wasn't about ending a marriage anymore. This was about justice. Michael sat at the defense table in a suit that was expensive but not Rolex expensive. Federal custody had aged him, carved lines into his face that hadn't been there 6 months ago. When I took the stand, he stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Rage, yes, but something else too. Maybe regret. Maybe just disbelief that the woman he'd so thoroughly underestimated had brought him to this moment. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney David Chin, walked me through my testimony with care. How I discovered the initial fraud. How I documented everything. How I'd worked with the FBI for months while maintaining my cover. Ms. Morrison, did you ever fear for your safety during this investigation? Chen asked. Every single day, I answered honestly. But I was more afraid of what would happen if I did nothing. If I let him destroy me and then move on to his next victim. Michael's attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Torres, tried to paint me as vindictive, as a scorned wife seeking revenge through false accusations. But the evidence was overwhelming. Dozens of documents, hundreds of emails, recordings that captured Michael's own words admitting to the fraud. When I stepped down from the stand 3 hours later, I felt lighter. The truth was out there now, officially in a court of law. Whatever happened next, I'd done everything I could. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Michael Bradford guilty on all counts. 16 counts of wire fraud, 8 counts of money laundering, conspiracy, and tax evasion. At sentencing, Judge Thomas Warren showed no mercy. Mr. Bradford, you stole from investors who trusted you, from contractors who worked for you, from the government, and from your wife. You showed no remorse, no accountability, only arrogance. I'm sentencing you to 28 years in federal prison. 28 years. Michael would be 72 when he got out. His empire gone, his reputation destroyed, his freedom stolen the way he'd stolen from everyone else. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was already done looking backward. The Morrison Foundation opened its doors on a crisp October morning in Cambridge, in a renovated brownstone, not unlike the one I'd left behind in Beacon Hill. But this building felt different. Warm, welcoming, safe. Our sign hung above the entrance, empowering financial freedom. We'd already helped 43 women in our first 6 months of operation. Women who'd been told they were too stupid to understand money, too weak to leave, too dependent to survive on their own. We taught them to read financial statements, to recognize manipulation, to document abuse. We connected them with attorneys, forensic accountants, and therapists who understood the unique trauma of financial control. My book had been published in August. Climbing bestseller list and generating speaking invitations, I was slowly learning to accept. Every time I spoke, women approached me afterward with stories that sounded like echoes of my own. And every time I told them the same thing. You're not alone. You're not crazy. And you're definitely not too dumb to understand. You're exactly smart enough to fight back. On the foundation's opening day, my father stood beside me as we cut the ribbon. Reporters were there, but this time I welcomed the cameras, wanted the coverage, needed the message to spread. How does it feel? A journalist asked. A year after your husband's arrest, you've built all this. What would you say to him if you could? I smiled, thinking of Michael in his federal prison cell, stripped of his Rolex and his arrogance. I'd say thank you. Thank you for underestimating me. Thank you for thinking I was too dumb to understand business. Because that assumption, that's what gave me the freedom to investigate you without interference. Your contempt for me was the weapon I used to bring you down. That night, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, smaller than the brownstone, but mine in a way that house never was, and looked out over the Charles River. The city lights reflected on the water, steady and bright, full of possibility. My phone buzzed. A text from Agent Webb saw the news coverage. The foundation looks amazing. Proud of you, Caitlin. I typed back. Couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for believing me. His response came quickly. You did the hard part. I just gave you the tools. The courage was all yours. I set the phone down and breathed in the cool autumn air, feeling something I hadn't felt in over a decade. Peace, not the forced peace of pretending everything was fine, but real peace, the peace that comes from knowing you fought for yourself and won. Michael had once whispered that I was too dumb to understand business, but I'd understood it perfectly. I'd understood that truth documented is truth protected. I'd walked into that divorce courtroom as a woman. They all thought they'd broken. I'd walked out as the architect of their downfall. And now, Now I was using everything they'd tried to take from me. My education, my intelligence, my strength, to help other women do the same. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the river and the promise of change. Somewhere in Boston, another woman was probably standing in a beautiful house, wondering if she was crazy for questioning her husband's story, for feeling trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside. I hope she'd find my book, find the foundation, find her courage. Because if I'd learned anything from this nightmare turned triumph, it was this: you're never too dumb, too weak, or too far gone to rewrite your ending. Sometimes you just need someone to hand you a pen and remind you that you are always the author of your own story. Thank you so much for watching this story on Stories Untold. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories of courage and justice. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, and tell me, what would you have done in Caitlin's situation? See you in the next story.